Hello folks, my name is Leah Bonasage from the Master Lab Systems. Today I'll be looking at real-time notifications with WebSockets and Python FastAPI. Okay. So the agenda for today is what you'll learn. So the first topic we'll be introducing or we'll be looking at is what WebSockets are and how they work. Looking at real-time, if you see traditional HTTP request, and also how to implement WebSocket endpoints in FastAPI. Also looking at a practical live a notification system or a communication system, more like a chat-to-chat system, basically. Okay, so why real-time matters? Okay, looking at the common use cases for real-time, you could say a live chat applications mostly rely on real-time notifications or real-time messaging system. So for example, a real-time live chat application and also a real-time dashboards looking at notifications for events such as comments and likes, collaborative editing, and also it provides some big benefits such as instant user feedback and high engagement and reduced polling and load. Okay, so that's why real time really matters, because of course it's very important to get the data real in a real time so you don't miss anything in between. Okay, so let's look at the differences between HTTP, which is the traditional HTTP request, and the WebSockets. Okay, so in terms of the feature itself, so in connection, so HTTP request only allow one request per time, or they only processes one request per time, while WebSockets, they are quite persistent. Looking at the second feature, which is the direction. So in a standard HTTP traditional way, which is it's a client server, so meaning a direction would mean a client would request some data and the server would respond with some response. So that's how the direction works, meaning it's a client to a server, not the other way around. While on the WebSockets, the direction is bidirectional, meaning you can get a client that sends a request to the server and also a server that sends a response to the client at the same time. So it's bidirectional. It's not dependent on the client side only. Okay. So moving on, let's look at the feature called latency. So in terms of the latency as well, so HTTP requests are very high in terms of the latency, while the WebSockets are low because okay, and also the use cases for those. So looking at the use cases for HTTP request and the WebSocket, so of course HTTP is most suited or most useful or recommended in developing those CRUD APIs, meaning those create, read, update, or delete APIs. So it's very much useful in developing those, while the WebSockets, or it's more useful in terms of getting real-time updates. So that's where WebSockets are, because of the direction itself. It's not dependent on the client. A server as well can send some notification to the client. So unlike waiting for client to initiate the connection. Okay. So moving on, let's look at how WebSockets work. Okay. So WebSocket handshake starts with HTTP. Of course, the WebSockets, they also use HTTP to initiate the connection to the server. So that's done via HTTP. So WebSocket handshake starts with HTTP and they keep the connection alive, of course, since they do a bidirectional connection, so they keep the connection alive. And also it enables sending and receiving messages in real time, meaning for example in chat applications you can send a message and receive a message at the same time, meaning it enables that sending and receiving of data or exchange and this exchange of data in the real time. Okay, so let's look at this mini flow diagram. Of course it's not really, but it's just a flow diagram. So on a browser side, a browser would send a request to the server, of course, meaning the server will be a WebSocket server, and the WebSocket server will forward that request to the event source, and the event source will return with a response to the WebSocket server, and the WebSocket server will then return the response to the end user, which is to the browser side, to a client for that matter. Okay, so let's look at the real world use case examples for a WebSocket. Okay, so imagine you have a live notification system. So a event, for example, a new user signs up and then a WebSocket broadcasts that. So new user, for example, joined named Alice. So automatically your dashboards get instant updates with the new user, which is Alice that just joined. So, and also that's one of the other big use cases for WebSockets. Another thing for WebSockets is that they integrate easily with event streaming tools such as Kafka or Redis, and also for salary background task auth tokens for securing messages. Okay, so looking at the best practices, of course, so it's important to store client state in Redis for scaling, and also using messages queuing to decouple processing. So message queue would mean if you would have, for example, these event-driven tools such as Kafka or RabbitMQ to keep the messages, so you can process messages to each individually. Looking at the authentication, also it's very important to add authentication to ensure that before even initiating a connection, a user is authenticated first. And also it's very important to gracefully handle the disconnects instead of just disconnecting the whole connection. It's important to handle those gracefully. Okay, so let's look at a proper live example. Now we can create a simple mini chat-to-chat application using WebSockets. Okay, so first thing we need is to go to IDE. Of course, if you have a Python IDE, it's important to use it. So at my site, I'm using PyCharm. So the very first thing we need is to create a project. Of course, I will just create a module in this case because I already got the setup of a project. So, but if you were to create a new project from scratch, so I would strongly recommend that you use Poetry like I do for my site, because I like to use Poetry as the building tool since it makes things easier to manage the dependencies. Okay, so the first things first, if you to create a new project from scratch, okay, so using Poetry, you'd say Poetry new. Okay, so giving it the name of the application itself, which is now a real-time notification. So I've already created this application, so I'm just giving you an example of how you would create a new one if you need to create a new one. So of course you give it a name. So Poetry new, it will create that application at that directory. So hitting enter will create your application. So again, since I've already done the process, I've already created the project, so I'm just going to build on top of it. So for new users, of course, we'd have to create a new project. So once you create this project, now you begin to add your dependencies. So the dependencies you need, of course, a FastAPI web server and also FastAPI itself. It's also adding those dependencies as well with Poetry would mean you can do Poetry add. Okay, so now UVCon as the web server, UVCon, and you hit enter, it will add the web server, which is your UVCon, and also instead of adding UVCon, add your FastAPI as your base framework for the project, and you hit enter as well. So once you got those in, you can begin creating your project. So again, as I've already done the process, let's go ahead and start adding some code and see how we can create this real-time chat application. Okay, so as I said, that's my application, a real-time notifications. As you can see, it's still empty. Okay, with a template folder that's also empty. Okay, so what we need a main file. So if we create a main, so let's create a main. Okay, let's not add to Git. So inside the templates, of course, we need the HTML file that will serve our chat or our basic front end for chatting. So let's go ahead and add an index.html. Let's use HTML5. Index, I'll make that index.html. Let's add that too. Okay, of course, we'll keep it there like now. So let's first start on adding some data inside this project. Okay, so now that we have a main file and an index to serve, so of course this main file has to serve that and also create a connection to our WebSocket. Okay, so of course I got some snippets already hooked up. So what I'm just gonna break those snippets in and explain the code. Okay, let's get the main first. Put in the main code. Okay, so just to fix the indent. Okay, so we have that in. So for example, let me quickly give you a brief explanation of the code itself. So we do an import of FastAPI from FastAPI when we get the WebSocket, and WebSocket disconnect. So meaning, of course, if you added FastAPI as a dependency, automatically you'll be able to get access to these classes, which is the FastAPI class and the WebSocket class and the WebSocket disconnect class. So of course, once you do those, we start, of course, initiating the clients. So of course, we create an empty list of the clients because of it's what keeps the connection alive and also what will distribute the messages to clients basically. So of course, the first page we have, the first function we have is to save the HTML file, meaning on the root directory or on the root or on the landing page of this application. This is what it needs to run. It needs to save, it needs to open this index.html file. Okay, so which is that file. For now it's still empty, which is fine. We'll add some code later. Okay, so moving on, the next function now that we have, it's the WebSocket endpoint. So what this means is that all of these chat messages will be controlled by that endpoint, which is the WebSocket endpoint. So we initiate a WebSocket connection and we await, which is we accept the connection to clients, and then we add each client that is connected to it, which is to that empty list we created. So we add each client that has accepted the request to that empty list, of course, and then we start to initiate a connection, ensure that all the clients are connected together, and then from that we start to broadcast the message to each client based or to each client connected. Okay, so that's what it means, of course. So as you can see, broadcast to all connected clients. So each message will broadcast to all the connected clients, so they have that end-to-end connection and they can be able to share the same data, of course. Okay, so once we have that in, so now let's go ahead and start to add some method and some functions and some basic HTML to it. Okay, of course, since this is a chat app, I added some little extras in my styling, meaning in my HTML, but it's not really a biggie not to have those. Of course, I will explain this as well. So here we need two functions basically, a function to send the message to the user and a function as well to create a nickname. Of course, we'll see the front end for this. So, but the very important functions we need, maybe let me run it and save it in front of you, then you can see, and then I will come and explain the code. But for now, since it needs to produce something like this, of course, let me save it and run the project, then you can be able to see it on the end. And then I will come and explain the code as well. Okay, so let's run the application. So again, if you have already done this process, like me, you've created your project, you added the code. So now what we need to do, we need to run. So using PythonRun, we can invoke the project and execute it. Okay, so of course the file we need to specify, it's the main file that we created, since it serves the HTML. And also this is how we run using Python. This is how you could run your Python FastAPI project using Python, of course. Okay, so let's hit enter. Let's wait till, okay, so it started, it is initiated. Okay, so meaning now our project is running on port 8000 on localhost. So if we go to that endpoint, so as you can see, automatically if we try to invoke that endpoint, it initiates a connection. Okay, that's fine. As you can see, WebSocket has accepted the connection and the connection is open. So it's now ready to register new clients. Okay, so now that we have in there, as you can see, folks, this is the mini chat. This is the mini front-end chat for this chat application. Okay, so now we need to join. Of course, as you can see, that's the join button. So this is now, it starts to show. So what we need, as I said, so from this we need, of course, 3 functions. So a send message function that allows users to send a message together, and also we need now, which is for the first, we need to set a nickname, as you've seen here, because it allows us to set a nickname. So you have to enter a name and so something in that will accept the input. So we need the input. We have that function to set the nickname that you've received from the input, and we have a function once you have registered or if you have already logged in or you have already accessed the page to send a message as well. So once you have that in, now we start to a function that will send a message to another user that have already logged into the WebSocket or that has already connected to the WebSocket. So that's that. But anyway, let me first show you how it works, and then I'll deeply explain the code as well. Okay, so now what we need here, so to showcase this, it's important to have 2 pages, of course. So now let me also open a new tab. So let me duplicate this tab. I will duplicate to ensure that we have 2 tabs, and this one we don't need it. So now let's move this one slightly up instead of, okay, let's put it this way, both of them. Okay, so now that we have something like this, so we need to send a message together. So like for example, any chat application whereby you can both directionally send each other messages, so something similar to that. So let's say now I enter a nickname, which is first nickname is Master Lab. So let's enter that one, and then let's join. There's the Master Lab. So Master Lab have successfully joined, and now the WebSocket server has to accept the connection, and also it needs to keep the connection open to ensure that other users as well or other clients can be able to create a connection as well. Okay, so now that we have that in, so we have Master Lab is joined. So now let's join with another user. Let's put this as FastAPI user. Let's hit join as well. Okay, so let's start to send a message from this side. So if you were to say, hi Master Lab, I sent a message, as you can see, automatically. As I said, this side is FastAPI is sending a message to Master Lab, which is that side, called hi Master Lab, and also again you can get the timestamp. That's what that function does, which is this one, or basically just this code does. It gets the message, creates a connection, and then allows to send the message together, and then from that also give us the timestamp for each message sent. So now that we have that in, let's go ahead as well and finish our end-to-end testing. So Master Lab, so FastAPI has sent the message to Master Lab. So Master Lab now has to respond, hey FastAPI, that was it, for example. So let's send that. So automatically this side too can get the message, and also you can see where that message is coming from. So this is how these chat applications behave. So using WebSockets, you can easily build or quickly spin up your own chat application. Okay, so let's send last message, of course, to respond from FastAPI to master lab. So if FastAPI also it, good, yourself, apps, okay, question mark. Let's send that one in. So as you can see, FastAPI has responded now. Good yourself. It even shows you there that FastAPI has responded with good and yourself. So now MasterLab can also respond back. So as I said, of course, folks, this is how these real-time chatting applications behave using WebSockets. Okay, so I think that should be it, folks. Okay, maybe just to do some last finals, as I said, to ensure that the best practices are secured in place, to ensure that also your application is tightened and it's free from spams and unauthorized users. It's important to, of course, validate each users before allowing them to register to your application or before allowing them to your application. So it's important to keep the best practices to ensure your application is safe when you are building these real-time chatting applications. Okay, folks, I think I will end here for today. So if you have any questions, please forward those or please type them in the comment section. I will be answering those. And if you like this video, please like and share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, folks. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Peace.